Good morning, folks. Ken Ring of www.predictweather.com. It's the 21st of May, and the moon is now in Virgo, the sign of Virgo. It's the windy sign, and the moon was closest to the Earth yesterday for the whole month. It's an event known as the perigee, an old astrological and astronomical word for when the moon comes closer, as it does every 27 days. When one body orbits another, there's always a closer point. It's hardly ever equally distant right the way around in its orbit. There's always a closer point and a further away point. And for instance, it happens with the Earth going around the Sun. The closest point is in the first week of January, and the furthest away point is the first week of July. And we don't call that perigee. We call that perihelion with the Sun, but with the Moon we do call it perigee, and the other planets we generally call that perigee as well. So it happens every 27 days, and when it does happen with the Moon and the Earth, what we get is an exaggeration of anything that is happening anyway. So depending on the season, for example, if it's the summertime, well, you'll get extra heat, and that will lead to rain because of evaporation. If it's winter time, you'll get extra cold, and that's what's happening right now in New Zealand and Australia. And it also brings about a fair bit of wind because the moon is closer, so you get stronger forces, stronger gravitational forces, and they create turbulence in the atmosphere, and they affect the air tide, the amount of air that comes in under the moon and then goes out again as the moon sets. So, and that affects the weather. Several things happen on perigee. You always get the highest tides of the month within 7 days of the perigee, and you also generally get a bunch of earthquakes happening, and that's what's been happening at the moment around the world. Now, another thing is happening today, and that is that the moon is crossing the equator heading south. So that's what the sign of Virgo actually represents. Now, when it crosses the equator, well, it's there's again more turbulence, and the moon is moving faster. So there's more power, more gravitational force comes out of it, and you get more earthquakes. So the perigee plus the earthquake, plus the crossing the equator, which some people call the lunar equinox, that's a very strong earthquake factor. And in New Zealand, they've had a whole bunch of them over the last couple of days. And they've happened along east-west fault lines, which is pretty typical of when the moon is crossing the equator. You get those fault lines once pinging off. Well, why is that? Well, look, the moon can't sort out land from water or air. It just pulls on everything that will either move or dislodge. And the moon hasn't got eyes, it hasn't got a brain. It's just pulling. And so the air is going for it, the land is going for it, moving around, and of course that lets the tectonic plates open as well. And of course it gets windier out at sea too. Now, so I think the earthquake risk will be over by tomorrow, because that will be the end of this little period of the clustering of these earthquakes, which is the perigee plus the crossing the equator factor. We'll also get strong winds within 2 days, because that's what happens when the moon crosses the equator as well. That actually happened exactly 2 weeks ago. If you remember, we mentioned it here when it last crossed the equator. But this time it has the perigee happening as well, which exaggerates whatever would be going on anyway, exaggerates the potential, and so it's going to be even windier this time because of that perigee. Now, I see the Met Service in New Zealand has just put out some severe weather warnings for strong southeasterlies for the weekend, and that's what you get. Now, where are the earthquakes? Well, the moon, as I say, is crossing the equator, so it's right on the middle of the Earth virtually. Now, on Tuesday, there was a big earthquake up in Coral Island, which is 46 degrees north. And then the next day, there was a big earthquake in South Carolina, and that's 32 degrees north. And then yesterday, there was an earthquake in North Peru, and that's just below the equator. So the moon's been coming down gradually, and so have the place where the earthquakes are. I don't know if I mentioned it's first quarter moon as well today. First quarter moon, the moon sets around about midnight. It's out of the sky all night and all morning, and it rises again at noon, at lunchtime. And that means that overnight you get a whole bunch of cold, you get rain, you get fogs in the morning. If there's fogs about, it's a high time for these things. And then when the moon rises again at noon, then there's a bit of a clearing, a bit of an easing. It's not as much rain, because when the moon's in the sky, it's more or less a protection from these elements, because it lifts the air up underneath itself, and it creates a buffer against the cold of space and also the heat of the sun coming in. So first quarter moon, crossing the equator in perigee. Hey, there's three things there, three strong moon events. They cause earthquakes, they cause mayhem, cause pretty well extreme weather around the place. So don't be surprised, but it'll be over in a couple of days. Thanks for watching.